This is the Spritz Girl Mindset Podcast, and I'm your host, Courtney Young. If girlhood is a mindset, this is where we practice it out loud and unfiltered. We're healing, we're yapping, and we're doing it with spritzes in hand. Here's your permission slip to be soft, messy, and magnetic as hell. So grab a spritz, grab a seat, no small talk, just the real stuff. All right, welcome, Jordyn. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to connect, discuss all the things, and be here. I love following your content and seeing your whole personality come to life.
We'll open up with, why don't you just share a little bit about who you are, what you do, what you're excited about, and then we can kind of get into it.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Jordyn Berlent. I am a self-development coach, a speaker, entrepreneur, starting my own thing. It's been amazing. Jordyn Berlent Coaching is my business. It's been up and running for over a year now. I meet with clients and also am just really passionate about sharing everything in the self-development space. So like however I can help guide emotionally intelligent women to transform their lives, take the depths of whatever they are going through and give them tangible direction in some sort of capacity to apply to their lives. That is what I love to do. So I do, like I said, one-on-one coaching and sell digital offerings, post on social media, all of the things just to really get anything I can out there for impact.
I love it because I feel like we're in like the same niche. We're like doing the similar work, not the exact same, but we're gonna get into some tangents today. I can already feel it.
That is my bread and butter.
Yes.
Love it.
I'm like, let's get into the shit of it. I hate when people want to just like dance around it and like not talk about the things that actually make us who we are, because like things that make us who we are like why here.
And it's like, yeah, I love that I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a speaker, I'm a coach. Like I do all these things. And I feel like that's so key for even just an initial like PSA for everyone out there is just let yourself be like doing the things you love and enjoy. And it doesn't all have to have like one label of what you're doing.
100%. And that actually transitions perfectly into the first thing I kind of want to talk about, which is girlhood and authentic storytelling. These are two of my like biggest pillars, two of the things that I am like the most passionate about. So kind of want to tap into this idea of emotional intelligence and identity and how that shaped you into who you are. So were you always like a deep feeler growing up? Like what was that journey like for you?
Yes. 1,000,000%, like didn't even understand what was going on with me. I was just always classified as the sensitive one. And I love using the terminology of emotional intelligence now because it really has so much overlap to the word of sensitivity. And I actually even love using the word sensitive now because it's broadened in definition for me of, yeah, like when you're younger, you're like, this is a weakness. I cry all the time. Why is all this happening to me? Why isn't this happening to anyone else? Like what's wrong in a sense? Where now it's just like the word sensitive is that I feel things deeply, like people's energy, things around me affect me more easily. But it's like when we could actually turn that into a strength. I love using the word emotional intelligence for that reason, because it really just adds this layer of like your EQ, like your level of intellect in this emotional capacity is a value add. It is a strength. And that's where I like talking about it in that direction.
And not only that, like even just hearing the way you describe that, like the word that comes to my mind is empathy, right? And I feel like so many times, like we could go so many different directions with this, but particularly as women, we are taught to self-minimize, to make our feelings less than, to not share openly and honestly because we're either too emotional or we're too much or we're too annoying. And I love the way you described it as the world, like people who don't know how to tap into that, they see that as weak. And it's actually the exact opposite. It is such a strength to be able to sit in your actual feelings and not just be aware of them, but like utilize them, because your story has such a huge impact and you don't even realize it. You don't even know the half of it until you start to do that work. And so that sensitivity and empathy, those things I feel like go hand in hand. Like there's not a negative, you know?
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that where a lot of the times it's gotten so misunderstood is to your point of learning how to really harness it and manage it and understand it for yourself. Because if not, I grew up a lot with people pleasers,
Mm.
and having that side of the spectrum of empathy can be really difficult because it's then people will see you in a certain way where they want to be able to tap into your energy, but then it just affects you so deeply. And then you think that you're being such a good person because you're so kind and sweet and amazing. And you are 1,000,000%. At the same time, it's like, how do you have that level of self awareness and quite frankly, respect to be able to put up certain boundaries of knowing how can I sit in my own body and know I'm a kind person without over giving
Yeah.
myself to.
There is a huge difference between empathy and taking on someone's problems.
Oh,
You
yeah.
cannot fix anyone. Everyone is responsible for their own feelings, their own emotions, their own journeys. And the minute we, as like empathetic people, try and take other people's feelings on, the minute we stop using that when you did X, I felt Y language and start using, well, you did this, so blah, 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 here's how you fix it. That's when we spiral and things become problematic because we're not able to separate. And that is, we got to be aware enough to be able to step back from that.
Absolutely. I'm curious, even for you, like, how have you maybe navigated this, whether you like helped people with it or for even yourself? I think it's really interesting, like trying to explain to someone who's maybe in the people pleaser boat, like, what have I done? Like, what should I really do so that I basically don't feel like I'm being rude and disrespectful to other people?
So I'm going to answer this with a question, but are you familiar with the Enneagram at all?
Of course.
Okay. So I'm an Enneagram 6, and we've talked about this a lot on podcast because Enneagram is a big, like, I love the Enneagram. I think it gives us great language to actually get into why we are the way we are when it's used correctly and not used as like a, personality, whatever. When you use it as a tool, it's very helpful.
Yes.
So for me, I talk a lot about my own neurospicy journey. So there's before I was diagnosed with my ADHD and after I was diagnosed with my ADHD, right? And I almost had the opposite experience of most people, meaning that in high school, I lived life extremely unmasked. I would like go around saying, I marched to the beat of my own drum. I literally would like tell my family, not even joking, that I was a Fruit Loop in a world of Cheerios, and I didn't get why people would make fun of me for that. I was just very like strange, and I loved that about myself. And then in college, I was constantly being told, you're too much, you're too annoying. You can't be a leader. You can't help people because people don't want to learn from you because you are so weird and annoying. So that's when I kind of learned that self minimization and masking was the way through. So what did I do? I started changing every aspect about who I was. I started self minimizing. I started being that girl that was saying, no worries, whatever you want all the time. I leaned heavy into the people pleasing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I started to pull myself out of that because I had mentors come into my life, and I realized that I can't preach your story matters if I don't believe that about my own story. If I don't believe that about my own work, if I don't believe that about my own journey, and if I don't trust myself enough to sit in the middle of it and be like, let's look at the things that make us messy. Yeah, we are loud sometimes. We spiral a lot. My like key phrase on this podcast and my platform is spiral with purpose, right? So like the spiral is part of it. The messy middle is part of it. And if I'm going to tell you, Jordyn, like your story matters, you should share it. You are making a bigger impact than you'll ever realize. I can't preach that. I can't tell that to you if I don't believe that about my own self and my own. So that was when I really started to do the work of, well, let's play with the negative feelings that I haven't let myself feel for so long, right? Let's tap into that anger, that resentment. Let's look at all of those people who said I was too much. What was I doing in those moments? How did I change myself? All right, we've done that work. Now, who am I actually? What matters to me? What are my values? What do I bring to the conversation? And when I'm having these conversations with people, when I'm talking to them, am I bringing my full self? Am I being honest? I think honesty is huge, right? Like if we're running from our own stuff, we're not being honest with anyone else, nor are we being honest with ourselves. So like erasing people pleasing and having empathy starts with you have to be honest with who you are and what you're about. And that comes from a core identity idea of believing that who you are and your story matters. So that's the work. The work is how do we get ourselves to believe that? How do we give ourselves the space to grieve? And then what is it that we actually believe? And how do we share that in a way that is empathetic, loving, and kind?
I love that. I love that. And even for me, like tying into some of the pieces that you just mentioned, because I wouldn't have necessarily considered myself a people pleaser. Like, I definitely leaned on the empathy scale, but I was always like, I put my foot down and say what I want when I want it. But most of the time, I go with the flow and I don't really care. And like, I like to be the easy breezy person. And I then kind of had an existential crisis at one point because I remember kind of thinking to myself, like, what do I want? Do I know what I want? Like with basic things too. Like, do I like chocolate ice cream or do I like vanilla ice cream? Like, I went through this whole thing where I was like, this is so silly and stupid, but also like kind of SOS. Like, what the hell is happening? And I really was like, if I can't sit here and be honest with myself of like, what do I want? And I actually can't figure it out and understand it. Like, I need to start peeling back the layers of how do I get there? What is it that I want? Because then it's like, well, if I can't even choose something basic, how do I then know what I want to like do with my life? And it goes from there. So I could see how someone who knows that they're a people pleaser would probably be like, okay, yes, I please the others, the masses, whatever. But to guide that person to really ask themselves that basic question of like, what do I want? Starting to get curious about that, how to start peeling back those layers and go down those like little things for themselves first.
Yeah. And I really think that it comes down to that softness is a strength too. Again, I think growing up, like we're taught you can't be soft. You have to be protective. And, like I'm a big Swiftie. So like I think if I can do it with a broken heart, like I'm a real tough kid, I can handle my shit. Like we're taught that that's the way like through. And I don't think that's true at all. I think the way out is through.
Yeah.
It's facing that stuff. It's allowing yourself to be seen as soft. It's allowing yourself to be seen as vulnerable. It's allowing yourself to be seen for who you are and not who your ego wants you to be, and not for who the world wants you to be, but for who you, Jordyn, actually is.
Right. Exactly. Like, I love this concept of soft strength that I talk about a lot on my page because it's really showing women how you can always come back to yourself in the soft ways. So it's a little bit, I talk about it a little bit more applicably to the people who are maybe like ambitious and go getters and they've almost overcorrected in that direction to be like, I'm going to hustle and prove myself and want to get into that world where there's the embodiment of how can you lean back into your sensitivity, slow down a little bit, play a little bit more, treat yourself, romanticize your life. And if you actually can strike that balance of being someone who is soft and like coming back to yourself in that vein, that is one of the biggest superpowers I believe exists. Because if you are someone who's empathetic and you have a zest for life and you're ambitious and you're a go-getter, like you're that balance is literally key. Like balance is key of life. So that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think about like health too, right? Like so many people want to think it's all or nothing. It's 100% or it's zero. And that's not true. Like if you're on a weight loss journey, if you're on a health journey, you have to have the 80/20 because if you don't give yourself that 20%, well, then you're going to be 100% restricting. And then you're going to burn out. Like there has to,
Exactly.
well, two things
Yeah.
got to.
Yeah. And I think that the hardest thing, like, I remember, like, if I was listening to something like this, I think the hardest part for me would be like, okay, yeah, balance sounds great. And it's like, I want to have that where, yeah, I'm not so restrictive in my diet, or I can figure out that balance. And the hardest part for me as a coach a lot of the time to express is the fact of like so much of how we live our lives and figuring out even how we want to live it, getting back into our softness, like all these topics that we've already talked about so far is back to your point a little bit of the living messy and spiraling and all of that is like everything is a trial and error process. When anyone is ever like, do what works for you, I'd be what is that advice? Like, how do I know what works for me or not? The answer is trial and erroring so much. Like the most basic is like, what workout do you like? Okay, maybe I'll try Pilates, maybe I'll try yoga, maybe I'll try this cardio hit class, and being like, no, I didn't like that. Like I would go with my friends all the time to try randomly like a treadmill, whatever class. And I was just like, I tried it again, still hate it. It's not for me. We're done with that, So like, but that's the process, whether it's physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, the trial and error.
Yep. And the thing too, just to kind of bounce off that, because I love that you said all that, is we have to learn to listen to ourselves rather than listen to our ego. Because if I had to take a guess at the reason people won't trial and error things, it's because we are so scared to let ourselves be new. We are so scared to let ourselves make mistakes. And so something my therapist used to tell me when I was going to therapy pretty regularly was, Courtney, you have to let yourself be safe to make mistakes. Like when you try something for the first time, you're probably going to screw it up. Like nobody is a master at everything overnight. And you have to trust that the people you're surrounding yourself with will see that and will help you and will hold you accountable and create that safety for you and aren't going to make you feel small for being new. So like when you're in those things, when you're in that trial and error stage, like going off of wellness, like cardio, everything isn't my thing. And I don't like it. I'm bad at it. I hate it. I would rather strength train. But if I didn't try the HIIT class and look like a dumbass dancing in front of a bunch of people, how am I supposed to know that? If I'm not a dancer, of course I'm not going to like be doing plies and whatever in the class. But I would never know if I didn't try. And if I let my ego get in the way, I'm never going to try it because I'm terrified that I'm going to mess it up or I'm going to look dumb or I'm going to look stupid. And it's like, that's not the point.
Yeah, exactly. I remember actually going to even like the things that I like now, but again, to your point of like trying them for the first time, I didn't work out until like later in life. I
Same
was
here,
like,
actually.
no thanks. But when I did realize, I was like, maybe this is important. Maybe I should do that. I would start going to some classes. And I remember going there and feeling so tense. Like my perfectionism was just off the charts, anxiety, like looking at everyone around me, probably sensitive also to like everyone being there and so many people. And I was like, everyone's looking at me, whatever. Obviously, no one is. And it's about thinking to yourself, like, honestly, I'm really never going to see these people again, and letting that actually sink in, because someone will tell you that. But every time you have those feelings and you show up to the class, it's like from your logic brain, does this actually matter? Like, and honestly, if you're then going to go down that rabbit hole of like, does this, why do I care? Ultimately, like, what is it that is making me care what other people are potentially thinking about me?
Right.
And is that true? And I would think that to myself. And it honestly gave me more freedom. Ultimately, like, it didn't change overnight. Still recovering perfectionist to the maximum, but it being like, how can I still show up anyway? Because I know that it's important to me, and letting that happen, like letting that be, and then really being able to then understand after that, do I actually like this class? And is this one that I enjoy?
I love that. And I also think that so much of that, like, we get it in our heads that the world has to be black and white. It has to be one way or another. And we don't give ourselves that space to play in the gray. And I think that that gray is where so much of our growth is, kind of like you were just saying. Like, if you don't let yourself risk, like, not knowing or risk being alone with yourself or whatever that is for you, you're never going to find out who you actually are and what you actually like because you're so focused on all the noise around you that you're not actually paying attention to yourself.
Yeah, that's actually one of the first things I tell anyone. Like, if they are not into any of this type of stuff, they're still on the like, this is all woo woo or have some stigma train, whatever. my first thing that I tell them to do is to go on walks without headphones. And I don't like, honestly, I'm not even like, oh my God, look at the nature, look at the trees. I'm not even like that. I'm more so, I mean, I am a very like in my mind person. So I do pay attention to my thoughts, whether that's good advice or bad advice, to each their own. But I do think that just getting used to the fact of being by yourself truly in those thoughts, like you're going to be maybe scared,
Yeah.
which is the problem, but it's kind of like you have to then push through and feel that through.
Yep. Yeah. Again, the way out is through. You can't avoid it. You can't avoid yourself.
You can't
Otherwise,
avoid it.
literally like walking in a body that you don't even know.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, that's when people are like, oh, like pay attention to how your body feels. And people think that that's crazy. It's like, no, genuinely, I've been someone who lived completely outside of my body. And I only even know that because I now am someone who lives within my
Yeah.
body. And that, again, such a woo-woo statement. I get it. I get it. But you only know after the fact, which is really freaky and weird.
Yeah. And I love that advice about like, again, like just go for a walk without headphones.
Yeah,
Start taking note of what your conscious experience is. Even if it's 5 minutes, like that's a win.
exactly.
That's a win. You kind of walk us through what you feel like it actually looks like to let your emotions guide you towards clarity and not chaos.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to recognize with this to start out with always is from a logic perspective. I'm very much a proponent of using a productive, external, tangible type of practice, like a doing thing to get into a state of being or understanding these types of concepts. So logically, I think for anyone listening, if they were to be like, how do I navigate my life, to your point too, from a place of authenticity and not ego, let's say, always, what is the loving option in this case scenario, especially choosing love, fear?
Yes.
So, and this could be, again, tough, again, trial and error, 1,000,000%. If you want to conceptualize this even more, I like to think of this as if I were a parent talking to my child. What would be the loving thing that I would tell them? And go from that point of view. Because a lot of times fear can mask itself as being either the thing that is, "Oh, don't go down that path, like that is bad." Or it could be the you have to take a leap and jump. And for me, I think the prime example of this was when I started to even post on TikTok. I was not speaker, I introvert, like totally behind the scenes, whatever. And I still worked at my corporate job at the time. And I just was getting for months and months and months this like idea to post on TikTok. I'd been doing my self-development for a long time. I was like, I know all this stuff now. Like, what do I do with it? And it was like, post, you have to put yourself out there. You have to teach it. You have to share it. You have to start somewhere. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, no way. But I said to myself, I'm like, I actually have no other choice, because if the fearful option is holding me back, the loving one is telling me to share my voice and to give my insights to other people. Like, how would that ever be an option that like the universe wasn't telling me like was a bad idea? You know, like that's obviously not a bad idea.
And what's the worst thing that happens is a question I ask my clients a lot, like to your point, like when you're making these decisions in fear, like, okay, well, what's the worst thing that happens if you do post on TikTok?
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like a lot of people on social media will be like, just take the leap, like do it, whatever. There's still rationality here for sure. Like think it through for yourself, because yes, like at some point you're never going to be fully prepared to make some sort of leap and go after the thing. Like I was still scared shitless. Like I actually posted my first TikTok and then was flying on the plane. I literally shut off, put on airplane mode and was like, goodbye, I'm out.
Yeah.
Tapped out. And
Yeah.
then I'm like, let's see what happens when I land. I don't even know. I don't care.
It's so scary. Like I just started my journey. As much as I've like, I want to do coaching and I have done group coaching for a while, but like, how do you grow your business? Well, you grow your business by putting yourself out there and sharing the knowledge that you have, which means posting on social media, which means if you don't know social media, it's a huge learning curve, and editing. I don't know the first thing about any of that, but guess what? You learn, and you can't learn if you don't try.
Exactly. And especially from something like this for both of us of putting ourselves out there, like, I don't know if you feel this way, but I would say honestly, like only recently after this being, I left my corporate job like a year and a half ago, was doing TikTok a few months before that. But throughout this whole journey, I still was like, felt eaten alive like every day. I was like, I need to just we're doing this. So the fear's going to have to go away at some point. Like, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm just like chilling, pushing it through, whatever. I do think that like there's still I feel that maybe that's even gone away more so because I've gotten more comfortable in the sense that you do just keep trying different things. And I've gotten less averse to needing to stick in one lane,
Yeah,
which I guess is bringing our entire conversation full circle.
literally.
But it just being like, okay, like I've tried this and it actually didn't even work out. But do I really care? Like, yeah, like that hurt that it maybe like didn't work out or whatever, or I didn't get to some goal in time. But you kind of like use your life as, again, that trial and error process to be like, oh, okay, like I didn't feel as badly from that not doing well as I maybe thought that I would have felt. And you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm like,
Yeah, I think so many people like, we talk of authenticity as one of authentic storytelling specifically is one of my big pillars, but I feel like authenticity is kind of one of those words that we see thrown around so much. And it's, I don't know, it's becoming like the new LOL in coaching world, like coaching. Everybody wants authenticity, but nobody knows how to actually like talk about it. And so much of it is just taking ownership of your own story.
yeah,
And when you're talking about authenticity, like that is what it boils down to. Presenting as who you should show up as online is not authentic. That's not bringing your full self to the conversation. So, like, I love that you're sharing that because I think so many people want this idea of authenticity, but they don't understand that that starts with you being honest and taking ownership and just being yourself. And guess what? Like, you're gonna lose people in that process. When you start to do the work, don't expect the world to stand up and applaud for you.
yeah,
It's just not gonna happen. And, like, learning to embrace some of those emotions, learning to, like, deal with grief and, like, actually, like, work through that, learning to show up as yourself, learning that it's gonna hurt sometimes and not everything is gonna go the way that you expect it to go. That's authentic. So, like, don't say you want authenticity if you're not willing to do the hard work.
yeah, yeah. And I even get a little bit like, conflicted of the types of advice to give people with this word of authenticity because again it's like everyone's talking about it but how do I get there sort of thing. And I went through it from a very like mental health type of capacity because I think it's really I see a lot of this like authenticity in my own words is much more of a process of peeling back the layers of yourself. And what I mean by this is that like for me, I had like crazy, like anxious, anxiety, like that types of feelings. And I wouldn't have known, am I authentic or not by any means. I used it of like focusing, I couldn't stop focusing on the negative parts of my life. And that's why I started going to therapy to be like, I want to get help with whatever this is. As I started going down that like process, it started to become clear to me that we are now helping to release and unravel all of the negativity that is around you. And what is underneath those things are guiding you toward that authentic self. So it's not really a like, I'm coming back to my authenticity or like I could grow into my authenticity. I see it as like we are shedding the layers that are blocking you from your authenticity. So then from there, it becomes I've loved because I think now for like people like you and me, social media or building a business is like a next layer of this, of building your authenticity more because you went through the process of understanding what was not authentic to you first.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that you described it that way. And I think that's so true. And I think, again, so many people get so caught up in the, I don't even know who I am.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's see, like, I'm going to hold your hand when I say this, but like, got to be willing to peel back those layers. You got to be willing to
Yeah.
do the work. And it's doing the work is not just a buzzword phrase that we hear from like, big time coaches. It is peeling back those layers. It is getting honest. It is looking at the root. It is letting yourself fail. Like that is doing the work. And it all has to come from this like innate place of your story matters and it makes an impact. And if you don't believe those things, like that's your work. Let's start asking, well, why don't you believe those things? And how do we work through those things?
Yeah. And I think something actually too, if there's then the people who feel that they maybe even are doing the work or that they love this type of information and they are in the like, let's get it with the mental emotional health category. I remember getting the loving advice of you could know all the things from a mental capacity, but if you don't apply it and make it where you're feeling it, you're doing, you're not just intellectualizing everything. That's part of the work too. That's your next step. And you need to go down that path and it all hurts. And you're like, well, when am I ever going to be done? And it sucks. And you're just like, that's it, my friend.
Yeah. And I think so many of us end up feeling like when we're going down that path, that feels like failure when it's actually like evolving.
Yeah.
It's actually like giving us the space to really grow into who we are. Think about a caterpillar, right? Like a caterpillar starts as a caterpillar and then it goes into a cocoon. And
Yeah.
like, I don't know, from the outside looking in, if we didn't know the life cycle of a caterpillar, we might see that as failure. We might see that as withdrawing. We might see that as like dying to ourselves. Like a mentor I've had, some advice I've gotten is you have to die to the thing that will literally destroy you. Like
Yeah.
the way I was, you have to die to the thing that will destroy you. You have to sit in the middle of it. You have to face it. That's how you become the evolved, beautiful, free butterfly. But if you're not willing to do that work, you're not willing to die to those things, you're not willing to stop listening to your ego, you're always going to be stuck in that caterpillar phase.
Yeah. And it's funny even because I always even think about like movies and creative types of media, things like that, because there's always evidence around us that people are like killing going down these types of avenues, but you really don't ever see the messy work. I think that's like the evolution of people like me and you talking, and people who are in this space are much more open about talking about that. It is literally like the hardest thing ever. Point blank. I don't know what else to say because I think, and even for me, I'm like, I've been scared to say that because I'm like, I don't want to deter people from
Yeah,
doing this.
it's hard.
But it really is like, wouldn't be this worthwhile and this impactful, or it wouldn't be this hurtful if it wasn't this impactful, basically. Like it really is that you're creating a ripple effect for yourself and the people around you and generations to come. Like that is not going to be like an easy little thing. Like it's just not.
And so much of the time, like, I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, I feel like I'm doing so much work right alongside my clients.
Yeah.
I'm not coming to my clients and being like, you should do this work because I'm healed and I'm perfectly fixed. No, like
Yeah.
we're right in it with you. And I think that people get so caught up in this. Instagram is like a highlight reel and this market is so oversaturated. And any coach that is telling you like they have it all figured out and they have the secret to run. That is a red flag. And it's not true. Like that is not somebody you should be taking advice from. And you should never be taking advice from somebody who you don't want to be like or who you don't want to be one day. And I can tell you right now, people who are not showing up as their full selves and are telling you they have all the answers, they don't.
They do not. Point blank. Like, drop mic, seriously. But what I'll add also is that everyone in our lives are mirrors to us in some capacity. And I love every time I get on a client call, they are wanting, I catch myself speaking advice that I need in this exact moment. Like, whenever I create content, I'm like, oh my God, I needed that advice immediately. And I will actually, so honestly, I will actually sometimes watch my content back from like way past because I'm like, I need this advice. And to your other point from earlier, if I'm not embodying the advice that I'm giving to my clients, I'm not going to get it perfect. Again, to your point, But if I am not at least being intentional and trying to embody that and catching myself when I am faulting without putting that immense pressure on myself, but just genuinely living by what I believe, then I would not want people working with me. Like that would, that's the whole point is like we're all trying and we are trying to practice what we preach.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you said that, and I think intentionality, again, that's another word that's, like, such a buzzword, but
Yeah.
it's so when you lean into like, let's peel back the layer. What is intentionality? Intentionality is honesty. It is ownership. It is when you do X, I felt Y language. It is realizing that you are responsible for your own feelings. It is realizing that that work that you're doing, like, you're not gonna be perfect. It's never gonna be a full highlight reel. Literally, every single person has work that they need to be doing. And it's leading and loving from a place, I think, to go again, back full circle, back to where we started. It's leading and loving from a place of softness and empathy. It's realizing that that vulnerability is a strength. And it's not the fake vulnerability where we've intellectualized everything. And because, like, for me, I'm really good at talking about the hard things that I've gone through, and people will listen to my story and listen to where I came from and be like, "Oh my god, that's so vulnerable." It was one of the things that growing up in the church, I hated about the idea of testimony night, right? So like I'm not sure if you ever like grew up in that setting, but like at church camp and stuff, they would get everybody together and everyone would share their testimony, and it
Mhm.
was always like people would be soft, but that's not authentic. You're literally creating that environment for people to like share their lowest of low moments, and it's like that, but that's not the point. That is not genuine authenticity. That is not genuine vulnerability, because you're like not coming from it in a honest way. You're coming from it in a I want belonging and acceptance place, or an
Mhm.
I've intellectualized this place, and that's not
Right.
the point.
Yeah. Right. It's like learning to really know how for you want to show up so that you can express vulnerably and know that I think it even is like that level of coming back to intentionality of like, do I want to, like, do I trust myself or do I trust the people around me for me to express this? And then knowing like I have my own back regardless if I do share.
Yeah. Yeah, like I can talk day in and day out about how everything with my dad kind of went down, and like that was really rough, and like I didn't grow up super easily because of that. And again, people be like, "Oh my god, that's so vulnerable." And like, thanks, at one point it was, but to me that's like if I'm truly being honest with myself, that's not me being vulnerable. That's not me bringing my full self to the conversation. What is being vulnerable and bringing myself to the conversation is saying, I really struggle with this idea that I am constantly in trouble, even as an adult. I feel like I am constantly in trouble. Like I have to do things perfectly, because if I don't do it perfectly and I mess up, I'm going to be fired or I'm going to be let go because of the way that I was raised, because of the things that happened to me at a very young age. That's vulnerable. That
Yeah.
is harder to share. That is leaning into the truth of it all. That's not the situation that I went through that I intellectualized.
Right. And that's maybe even a point too to just be like, I think vulnerability is whatever one own person, like what you as an individual consider vulnerable. Because I could see how like someone else would find if they were in a situation like that to be like, my story is my vulnerability. Like I don't share that with a lot of people. And, I want to bring that to the table. So it is about being like, how can I just reveal more of myself and be able to go into that and yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I use, like, myself in that example, because I've intellectualized my own story, and so for me, like, that's not that's not vulnerable. It's actually very deceitful, because I'm an open book about it, but what is actually vulnerable is what's underneath that. For you, it might be sharing your story. Maybe that's your vulnerable. Maybe that's the thing you need to start doing, is, like, taking ownership of those things that happened to you, but, like, for everybody, it's different, and when you are sharing about yourself, deep down what that thing is that you want to share,
Right.
and like being honest about that and taking ownership about that, I think that's the work.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually loved when I was in my part of learning about this, like vulnerability, the word always reminds me of Brene Brown because she preaches vulnerability. And I always love how she talked about it because it was really about like taking your armor off and talking about, and that gives it this like power, powerful essence too of like, you can take your armor off and just being vulnerable shows your strength and ties into how I really thought of this concept too of like soft strength becoming, a concept of like that there is such strength in these like softer, vulnerable, sensitive, all these words that we've used. And I love how she speaks about it. So also I would recommend anyone listen to her TED Talk if they haven't
Yeah.
already.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like time literally has flown. I do want to like move us to that wrap up time. My final question for you before we kind of get into like how people can support you and everything like that would be what would you say to someone listening who feels like they're stuck in the spiral and is afraid that they lost themselves?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, if we think about a spiral, if we're mentally going down that road, it's about trying to hold on to something to really get to a place where you can feel more stable. I like using analogies like this of things that we could understand in our physical world because so much of our mental emotional space really does tie back to how we can really conceptualize. I'm also a very visual learner. So I think that that really helps. And I think that the things that can really help to stabilize you 1,000,000% the people around you. And especially if you don't feel that you can trust the people around you who like you're going through this and you're like, no one understands, no one believes me. Like, yes, like, of course, if therapy is something that you want to do, great. But honestly, even like going to like TED Talks, like I just mentioned, or podcasts or social media, like people where you can feel like they provide this sense of semi comfort to really just start to help bring you into some sense of comfort and clarity. I think that's really the first step is really just like, how can I seek out something outside myself, but like tangibly helps me stick myself into the ground on this earth to like get there. That's where my brain goes of really just getting out of that spiraled state.
I love that. And I love that you shared that. And I think that that analogy was so helpful and such a great place to start. So thank you so much for sharing that. This is,
Of course.
and I feel like we could go back and forth for hours. Like,
Yeah. No, I did not even, I was like, we were here for 5 minutes.
literally, it feels like that. But I do want to give you the opportunity to just talk a little bit about you and what you offer and how my audience can connect with you. So, floor is yours, whatever you feel like sharing.
Yes, of course. So if you want to connect, my website is jordynberlentcoaching.com. My Instagram is Jordyn Berlent Coaching. My TikTok is just my first and last name, Jordyn Berlent. And I would love to connect, DM me, chat, follow along, all the things. I'm currently working on some digital offerings to share with people so that they could get a little sense of advice and journal prompts. Because a lot of times when someone tells you journal, you're like, well, what prompt do I use? What do I need? And I want to really help people in very specific challenges and predicaments of how they can really start. Because if they are in that spiraled state and they're like, I need something right now before I do the therapy or go to the podcast or whatever it is, to have these as a little bite-sized thing to touch on to really help them and navigate them through that craziness. So be on the lookout for that. Super excited to provide that to everyone and excited to connect with who's ever listening.
Yeah, I love that. Your softness is not the opposite of your strength, it is your strength.
Agreed.
Jordyn, thank you so much for your time and for being here today. And for my audience, we'll see you next week. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.